Hello and welcome to episode 16 of Fizz Free, and this one's looking at the topic of habits. Ruth and Clare look at how our drinking behaviour can change over time. Clare even contrasts how much she drank on her 21st birthday compared to her 30th, and there is a difference. She looks at reasons behind that, how age, location and relationships can all contribute to the development of our drinking habits. They also look at the role of association and expectation too, what we expect of ourselves and what others expect of us, plus ways to break those habits of drinking, how to get the feel-good factor in other ways, forming new habits to fill the void, and how those small habits can grow and ultimately give you the cumulative benefits of a life with less fizz. We hope you enjoy listening. Thanks for tuning in today. It's Fizz Free.
Welcome to Fizz Free. Today you're joined by Clare and Ruth, and Clare's going to kick this one off because she's got a really good topic of looking at alcohol and habits.
I was really thinking about how it all begins for most people, and then obviously it turning into something more when we are talking about the habit of drinking alcohol. And then that has led me down quite a long path, actually.
Down the rabbit hole.
Down a rabbit hole. So I just wanted to talk through it, really, which is, I think we're all creatures of habit. And most people start with alcohol, just being like an occasional thing. So when does it, go from being an occasional situation to becoming an addiction? So I was looking at what can create those initial kind of habits, really. And I think I'm going to pose that question to you, Ruth, but for me, I definitely think it was time of day. It was also the people that I was with, and also the places. I think there's expectation that you're going to drink dependent on those three things. And I was also looking back at first being an adult, if you like, and being allowed to drink. And it reminded me of my 21st birthday party. Would you believe I had one glass of Baileys all night?
Oh my gosh, I didn't know that.
Wow. What a contrast is that to fast forward 9 years to my 30th birthday, which obviously you attended both of those parties.
Yeah.
I can definitely say I had 2 bottles of wine and a half a bottle of Baileys, because I think actually your brother bought me a bottle of Baileys that day.
Yeah.
So how has that gone from on my 21st birthday party, which, I've had, say I started having a tipple when I was like 16, how in those 9 years has that become? And I think actually a big part of that, of the initial outset, is habit. And I think those 3 things, the time of day, the people that you're with and the places that you go, really affect and can increase that level of alcohol that you can tolerate. So how about you? What do you think it was a habit to start with? Do you think there was a level of expectation of you drinking dependent on certain circumstances?
I think it's a bit of both, really. And what's thought-provoking about this is, as humans, we are creatures of habit anyway. We go to the toilet, we automatically wash our hands. For most people, when they get up in the morning, the first thing they do is put the kettle on because they want to make a cup of tea or have a cup of coffee. You get to sort of 12 o'clock and you might be thinking about lunchtime, in that window, sort of 12 till 1:30. Same with dinner time. Perhaps a lot of people eat between the hours of 5:30 and 7:30. So I think as humans, we are habitual anyway. I think when you throw addictive substances into that environment and into those routines and into those habits, it probably just grabs you a little bit harder. And I think what you touched upon as well, which I think was definitely something I can relate to, is absolutely by association. There was certain friendship groups, even certain houses that I would go into and just think, oh, well, if I'm going to theirs, I need wine. And when I didn't, which was interesting, if I turned up at somebody's house who I would normally enjoy a glass of wine at, and it was either too early in the day or I was driving for whatever reason, and I would sit with a cup of tea or a glass of squash, and I remember it just feeling a bit uncomfortable, as if you've put the wrong size clothing on and you're like, oh, this feels a bit weird. So I definitely think habits can be a huge influence on people who drink, and I think they're very quick to fall into. And I've been very open and honest about my lockdown journey, and our habit became drinking quite rapidly every night. We went from being people who would occasionally drink, most likely at the weekend, to all of a sudden wanting to drink most nights. And it wasn't until we started to come out of lockdown and I started to go back to work that I was like, oh, this is weird. I've always had a rule, no drinking on a school night, apart from Tuesday night wine club. If you've listened to another podcast, you'll understand that. And it very much became that routine that it's absolutely acceptable to have a glass of wine every night. I think it's a really interesting, thought-provoking topic, and I think quite a lot of our listeners will probably relate to that. We've got some friends who religiously go out every Wednesday night for dinner, and they always say, oh, I look forward to that Wednesday night because I can have a glass of wine. It's almost that excuse that it's okay because that's our habit and that's our routine. Does that make sense?
Total. And actually leads me really, really nicely on to habit versus expectation.
Oh, that's a good one. I like that.
I've been reading and doing quite a bit of research on expectation.
Yeah.
And I think they are so closely linked. So almost the expectation on that Wednesday night or that expectation on the Tuesday night wine club is you are going to have a drink. So it's what other people are expecting of you. And I think that was a massive thing for me. And I don't know if you ever remember, there was a Facebook thing going around where you tipped a bucket of
the ice bucket challenge. Yeah. Yes, I remember that.
And I wanted to make it a little bit more me. And I thought, what are the things that people think about when they think about Claire? So what I did is I'd not long had my daughter, so I put a white t-shirt on and a black bikini, because those people that know me visually know that I am rather large or well endowed in that area.
That's putting it politely.
So one of the things that I'm known about is having a larger bust, and the other thing was having a glass of wine. So I actually said, cheers, here's to everybody that's having a glass of wine tonight. And I've got this bikini top on, albeit with a white t-shirt. And I thought, oh my God, that's because I'm living up to everybody else's expectation of me.
It's that self-fulfilling prophecy, really, isn't it? That people have got this view of me, so I might as well give them what they want and play up to that self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah.
I did want to chip in, but I wanted to let you finish, because when you were mentioning about the expectation that people put on you, don't you think there's also an expectation put on yourself? So if the friends I mentioned who go out every Wednesday, if they went out and didn't have wine, would they then think when they got back, oh, tonight wasn't as good, or oh, I really wanted a glass, and feel disappointed and as if they've missed out on something?
It's so closely linked, and I think those habits and those expectations are there before the addiction is.
Yeah.
I don't think you can get to that addictive part unless you've formed those habits. And I think going back to like my 21st birthday party when I had 1 glass of Baileys all night, which, like, when I thought about it recently, I remember the guy that bought me the glass of Baileys as well. It was Ginger Mark, who I used to go to work with. And he literally put it in my hand and said, "You haven't had a drink all night, Claire." But I didn't have a drink because I was chatting and I was dancing and I was having a good time. And I didn't have any expectation of myself to make sure that I drank that night. And yet, my 30th birthday, so what happened in those 9 years is I created this habit that was obviously going towards forming that addiction, really. So I think it's really interesting to wonder what happened in that sort of relatively short space of time that changed that. So I did a little bit of research, and unfortunately the latest research that I can get is in 2017, which I know is a little bit of a way ago, but I think it still puts the point forward that I wanted to make, which is in 16 to 24-year-olds, they're less likely to drink than any other grade age group. Again, is this telling that it's not yet a habit, that it's not yet an addiction? Because
that's a good point, actually. Yeah.
Like with myself in the, the 21 versus 30.
Yeah.
I hadn't got that need, I hadn't formed those habits. And I think that age group is really key. I think that's when you start going, people have a taste of it, don't they? And I suppose that age group, they might sort of binge on a Friday night if they're going out with their mates, or if they're going out once a month or twice a month, that's when they tend to have a drink. But I don't think they're sitting in the house night after night having a drink. And I think that's partly because they're not at the stage in their life like you and I are now, where you've got kids at home and you generally are falling into that habitual sort of routine of the day.
Yeah.
Because one day you might be going to the gym, the next day you might be going to the cinema. You're a law unto yourself, aren't you, in that kind of like age group. No one's pinned you down, you haven't got the responsibilities. And so those habits aren't sort of ingrained, whereas, and this is actually one of the main reasons that I was thinking about this subject, really, because there is no one on this earth that is more habitual than my husband. And we spoke about him in the past, and he drinks every day. And most people would think, oh, if he's drinking every day, that is a problem. And it could be bearing on a problem, but I don't worry about him too much because he's so habitual with it. Like, he never goes over or above. If you said to me, can you see him drinking more than he does now in the next 10 years? My answer would be no. Can I see him drinking any less? My answer would be no, because he's so
consistent.
He's so consistent. And I was not that person. I was the person that was like, needs more. And sticking to this survey, so it also said in England, 57% of people said they drank in the previous week. I think that's a little bit of a fib, actually. I reckon that most people would have drank the week before, but it said, nevertheless, it said 57%, so we'll go with that. And ironically, it then said that in the north of England, more people would binge drink.
That's interesting.
In the south, they would drink more often, but through the week. And I think that, again, is about habit. But what it shows is that dependent on the groups of people and your location and who you're hanging around with, also influence your habits as well, because generally we drink together, don't we? So it's really interesting to see, you know, age versus location versus what it also said is the highest earners are more likely to have a drink problem. So again, if you are in those kind of social circles, isn't it funny how we can almost fit ourselves into categories? And I think Jane has spoken about this subject, just touched on it briefly, about the mommy culture of wine as well. So almost put ourselves in clubs, create those habitual kind of habits as well, dependent on your time of life, dependent on who you associate with, you know, really are key to creating those habits. So that led me on to a podcast with Stephen Bartlett in it. He was talking about this new drug, which is called I'm going to say it wrong now, Ozempic, and it's basically the new diet.
Oh, the weight loss one, yeah.
Weight loss one that apparently everybody is on. And what he was saying, ironically, as I was listening to this, honestly, it's over 2 hours, but it is so interesting. But this guy just really captured me because of it. So he's lost 3 stone, this guy, and he's got a book out called The Happy Pill, I think it's called. Forgive me if that's the wrong thing, I should have wrote it down. But basically what it's talking about is a lot around addiction. So what he was saying was, with this drug, it basically suppresses your appetite. So you've got this hormone being suppressed and therefore your appetite going. And there's 12 things that he outlines in this book that are cons, if you like, of losing weight fairly rapidly. And he recalls that he is not depressed, but he's a little bit blur, a little bit numb, a little bit, you know, flat, I think is the word that he used. And he was saying he was flat because the pleasure that he got out of eating was obviously no longer there.
Yeah.
So I was thinking about it, and that's a massive, massive thing, isn't it? And I've always remember Craig Beck, and I know we champion him quite a lot on this podcast because I know you and I, Ruth, really, really valued his
definitely
input to our journeys. But he touches on a lot about pleasure and pain, the need to want pleasure and to avoid pain is the basic, fundamental why we do everything in life. And I've talked about before about my pleasure out of alcohol was not there for me anymore versus the pain of having it. So that seesaw tipped. But it's very, very difficult, isn't it, with food? Because my husband's a chef, and I think if you suppressed his appetite, he would literally be, you know.
I get so much pleasure from eating. It would be my worst nightmare.
But you're very lucky though, Ruth, in the fact that you counterbalance that with exercise, don't you? So,
yeah,
you know.
And what I eat generally is healthy, apart from chocolate.
You're allowed that chocolate when you're doing triathlons, etc. But what it made me think about was, you know, with alcohol, you are getting, to a degree, at the very start, you are getting some pleasure out of it, aren't you? And that's exactly the same with the food scenario. But what he was saying, really interestingly, was what they were finding is people that are taking this drug is they are seeking pleasure in other areas of their lives because their pleasure isn't coming from food anymore. And sometimes that's not a good thing. Sometimes people are becoming problem drinkers. Sometimes they're taking the drugs. So they are looking for that pleasure to be in a different form. And I think that we're going to extremes now, aren't we? We're going to real extremes now. But if I break that down to my journey, which is the only thing that I can relate it to, is that fortunately for me, the pleasure that I then transferred from what I thought was pleasure from the alcohol, I was fortunate to see that actually I could transfer that pleasure to something completely different, which is trips to the theatre or going out for dinner, ironically, or even just small things like buying myself a new nail varnish that I want, or whatever it is. I've managed to transfer that habit, if we go back to that habit, and I think it's the habit of wanting that chemical imbalance in your brain, and it's finding healthier ways to transfer that habit. So what we find is quite often with people that are a problem drinker, I know Jane's touched on before her love of jigsaw puzzles and things like that. So I think the whole basis of this conversation is you need to form a different type of habit, because we are all habitual creatures. I don't think it can transfer into a nothingness, like with that situation with the food situation and finding no pleasure out of food anymore. I think in those cases it's quite an extreme version, which is why it can be an extreme outcome for that person. But for us, let's just say from a moderate point of view, it's quite, I won't say easy, but a natural process to then fill that void. And we can't argue that there is a void, I think, when you give up alcohol. You have got more time, which is amazing, and you have got more space in your brain. So at that initial point of me giving up, I did form new habits, and those new habits were very, very small to start with, which were having breakfast, because I never ate breakfast when I was drinking, and I had what I wanted because I decided I could do, because I wasn't having the calories from wine anymore. So I had 2 pieces of buttered toast with peanut butter, and I had my multivitamin and my 2 omega-3 every morning. There was various things throughout the day which I won't bore you with, but my last thing at night was, and I still do it every night, is I have a cup of tea and I have a little bit of chocolate, and I do my face routine every night when I'm sat down and my little girl's gone to bed, and I've formed completely new habits because I've got that time and space. So what the point of the conversation is, I don't think we stop habits, I think we form new ones. Would you say that you've done that since quitting drinking?
Yeah, definitely. Like, similar to you, really. My absolute saviour at the end of a night, and I've got the kids to bed, and my kids are a bit older, and I'm talking 9:30, 9:45. I'm absolutely on my knees, and I just want to sit down with a cup of tea. It's a decaf tea, and when that hot liquid hits my mouth, it's just that sudden rush of relaxation. And I suppose I used to get that and look for that at the bottom of a wine glass, to feel that rush come over you and think, I can switch off now. But actually, in reality, that situation is exactly the same. The kids are down, they're safe, they've been listened to, they've had all their needs adhered to during the day. I can take my mommy hat off and just relax. And Did I need a glass of wine to be able to feel that and reward myself? No, that was just habitual and that addiction kicked in. Do I get the same kick out of a cup of tea? I absolutely do. And it's interesting you're saying about association and habits with friends and certain venues. We went out with some very close friends of ours, really, really fond of them. We get on very well. But there is quite a big drinking culture in there, and I did get quite a lot of stick off these mates when I gave up. And we went out recently, and one of the chaps who I absolutely adore, it's my best friend's husband, was drinking squash. And he let his wife drink this time, and he was driving. And I looked at him and I thought, he's looking really good. He looks healthier. His face looks a bit fresher. He's beefed up at the gym. And I just said, any other reason why you're not drinking? So he's like, no, honestly, I've said, she can have a drink. She normally drives. I'm all right. I'll take one for the team this week. And I called his bluff. I went, don't give me that. I said, that is a sober glow. And he's like...
Love that you called it out.
I did. And he's like, what do you mean? I said, it is a compliment, but you're looking absolutely amazing. You just look so healthy and you are glowing. And you could see he was half annoyed. Yeah, he was half annoyed I'd called his bluff. But equally, the other half of him was just like, oh, thanks, I feel quite nice about that. And, he has given me quite a bit of stick in the past. And he was like, yeah, to be fair, I'm just sticking off it for a bit. I'm focused on the gym. And when we were, because this was in front of our group of friends, and we walked to the next pub, and I was chit-chatting to him, and I just said, I'm really pleased for you. He's like, I feel really good, Ruth. I just feel more on top of things. I feel brighter. I feel sharper. My heart feels like healthier. And you could just see it. It was oozing out of him. And the point, coming back to the whole habit thing, is I was really proud of him that night, because sometimes just being around a crowd of people brings on those uncomfortable, habitual feelings where you think, I have to drink because that's the dumb from this group. And he'd broken out of that mould. And I remember the first 1, 2, 3, 4 times I went out in that crowd trying to break free of that mould. And he'd done it. He didn't own it straight away, granted, and I respect that, because some people want to stay in the closet a bit. Totally understand why. But eventually he did own it and was just like, well, yeah, why was I ashamed to admit that I want to feel better about myself and be healthier? So sometimes breaking that habit can be uncomfortable. It can be hard, but is it worth it in the long run? Absolutely.
But like you, in the fact that cup of tea at 9 o'clock versus glass of wine at 9 o'clock, by association, you're still chilling, the kids are still in bed, it's still a little bit of you time, it's still having that nice bit of relax. And like you in that scenario, did he actually want a beer, or was it just the expectation of other people on me is that I have a beer right now?
Yeah.
And he probably is a little bit, I wouldn't say embarrassed, but maybe a bit more thoughtful as to, God, I gave Ruth a load of stick, and now I don't want to have to own that, really, because he probably doesn't know where he's going with it, does he, right at this moment in time?
He does boomerang, like he will have moments of sobriety, and he always says, I feel so much better, and a few months later he'll have a drink again, and that's his choice. But I just wanted to support him, really, and just encourage that.
You probably made his night.
Yeah, probably did. Yeah.
Because when you are thinking, oh God, this is a little bit different to the norm, but then when someone shows you the positives of the difference to the norm, that's actually quite nice, isn't it? The fact that he's not going to wake up with a major hangover in the morning.
Exactly.
So nice, isn't it?
Yeah. I was just going to mention, we've got family members who are on holiday at the moment, And we had a picture last night that they'd arrived there, they got there safe and the sun was out and it's all beautiful. And we had the picture come through and it was a beer glass with beads of condensation coming down the edge with a blurred background. And my immediate thought was, what's behind the glass? I want to see what the sea looks like and what the rocker is like and what the scenery is. And I actually thought, you know what, I'm not going to shy away from this. I'm actually just going to point blank say, what's behind the glass? Can you send a picture of the real scenery? And I did.
Yeah.
Because I was like, I don't care about this glass taking up 80% of the photo. I want to see the beautiful scenery at this gorgeous place that you're at. And I thought, again, that's linking back to that habitual sort of reaction to being on holiday. I mean, how many times do you go to the airport and it's 6 a.m. and you see somebody next to you drinking a glass of wine or having a glass of beer? Because it's pure association, it's pure habit, thinking on holiday you can drink whatever time you like. You land, you get to the villa or you get to the hotel, the first thing, you know, I'm being very generalised here, you know, people do think, oh, well, I'm on holiday, first thing I want to do is have a glass of wine or beer by the pool. And again, it's breaking free of those habits. I went away recently and they had about 4 or 5 different mocktails at the hotel that I stayed at. And it's just about, like you said, it's replacing those habits. So instead of rushing down to the pool to grab myself a glass of wine, I rushed down to the pool and had, I think it was an alcohol-free pina colada. And I still had that same amazing buzz feeling when I sat on my sun lounger, picked up my alcohol-free pina colada, and I felt that rush of just, what did Jane call it in the previous podcast? Was it, I got it wrong. I think I said shimmer and it was meant to be glimmer.
Oh, glimmer.
Glimmer.
Yeah.
So I had that glimmer moment where I was like,
Glimmer, yeah.
oh, this is just amazing. And you get that rush of positive emotions. And I got that from an alcohol-free pina colada, changing that habit, changing that routine, changing that association.
Totally. And I do think that there's a pressure on and those expectations. And I've really thought about expectations because it was in like a book that I was reading, and it's expectations of yourself versus what other people kind of expect of you. And it's just like little things. And I know you do like a lot of organising, Ruth, and I was thinking about you because I was organising something and I was kind of like putting it on a group chat, and I was like, is this okay with everybody? I've done a bit of research on it and this is what I've come up with. And they were like, oh, have you looked at this website? And oh, have you had a look at this? And I'd kind of like, I was done. I'd done enough.
Welcome to my world.
I know, I did think of you. But I was like, if you have got a direct comparison, I'm not precious about getting this one thing. If you've got a good alternative to what I've suggested, absolutely fine to run with that. I'm not precious about it. And I just thought it's so liberating not to live up to other people's expectations. And I don't know about you, I think you've touched on this in the past, about there's that little bit of rebellion when you are sat in a room of people that are drinking and you're the only one that's not. I actually feel a little bit rebellious.
Because you're not a sheep. You're not following the herd. You're making your own choices and own decisions and owning that.
And break the habit.
Yeah, and break the habit. Yeah.
So I just wanted to finish really on, if you are starting a bit of a sober journey, have a little look at replacing those habits.
Definitely.
For me, I replace them with some self-care, making sure I ate breakfast in the morning. Just those little things will make a massive difference and make that journey a little bit easier for you, because we're all creatures of habit.
Thank you for listening to Fizz Free from your hosts Ruth, Jane and Claire. A reminder, we're 3 ordinary women who cut alcohol out of our lives and now feel passionately about sharing for free the multiple benefits of living a sober lifestyle. You can find us on Instagram, on Facebook, on most streaming platforms, as well as on X. We'd love it if you give us a like, a share, a follow to spread the word. And to get in touch by email, it's fizzfree0, 0, @gmail.com. Less fizz, more free.